105 hot water history Wednesday night. Gary, what's going on?
A lot of things going on in the world. 2024 keeps on plugging along and surprising us day by day, hour by hour almost.
I've actually been mourning for the last 2 days. Not that I was ever going to vote for him, but my boy Vivek out of the race. So
Yeah.
the president for the next 4 years of the United States is almost 100% guaranteed. Well, 100% guaranteed to let us down. At least with Vivek, when Vivek was in the race, it was like a 98% chance, you know?
Mhm.
But now that he's gone,
Yeah, he could do a lot of damage to the federal apparatus if he gets in there as attorney general or vice president or something along those lines. So hopefully he'll be able to operate as, they used to call Cardinal Ratzinger when he was head of the CDF under John Paul II, the Pope's Rottweiler. So maybe he's going to be Trump's Rottweiler.
who's VP? Who do you think? We've talked about this, but if
I,
you
I
had
think
if you
it,
had to say today,
I would go, Trump has already announced and been public that he already knows who the pick is.
yeah, I know, I've heard that.
Okay. So my inclination, I think it's between three people. And I'm good at, by the way, I'm good at prognosticating these things. Um, it's between three people: Tulsi Gabbard. And the reason I say Tulsi Gabbard is because that was my pick long before I even said it on one of our episodes.
No, you've been on that. I forgot who
Yeah.
the name was, but
The the,
yeah,
the
it was
only
Tulsi.
the only reticence I have now of asserting that it would be Gabbard is that there are rumors that she'll be Robert F. Kennedy's pick for VP. Maybe Trump swoops in and steals her as the VP. The other one is Tucker. I think that's a strong possibility. And then Vivek. It's going to be one of those three, I would assert.
I think it's Tucker,
Yeah?
and I think Tucker's the worst pick out of the three.
You think so? How so?
Maybe second. I think Vivek's the best. I think
Yeah.
that. I mean, I don't know. Did you see the Tucker interview where did I send it to you where he was talking about the Jeffrey Epstein got brought up
Okay.
and Trump was seriously like, and this was getting me super frustrated during the Vivek versus Trump stuff, even though, but
Mm.
Trump basically says that he thinks that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, and Tucker had to be
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
Tucker had to be like,
Oh, I
oh
remember. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah,
yeah,
that Tucker, that was a terrible interview.
it,
That was the worst interview he's ever done.
so that's kind of what I think is going to happen if Tucker's the VP. Like, I think he's
Uh-huh.
just a better guy at what he's doing
The
now.
commentator.
Yeah, just kind of like
Sure.
the weird, kind of corny, conservative
But when he gets exclusive interviews with,
journalist.
let's say that by some miracle Trump becomes president, although I don't think it's so miraculous now, because everything the left is throwing at him just bounces. He's Teflon Don, so it's conceivable that he gets in, regardless of all the shenanigans and the rigging and the stealing and the corruption that they're going to try to pull in the October surprise or what have you that the Democrats have in their bag of tricks. But it's conceivable he's president again. So those are going to be some terrible exclusive interviews, wouldn't you say?
So you're saying he's going to be interviewing? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
when he gets
if it's
interviews
if it's
with
more of what if it's more of what we saw, I don't get why the president just
Lee
doesn't have.
Harvey Oswald was the main shooter. That's what we found out. We're not going to release the documents. You know,
I
Operation Warp Speed wasn't my fault. That sort of thing.
right.
And Tucker's gonna be like, it really wasn't. It really wasn't your fault. You didn't mandate anything.
The Tucker laugh. I don't know how much I can put up with that, where he's just
Yeah.
cackling. Okay, not to make this a Trump podcast, but this is a story that I didn't even know about at the time.
Mm.
But according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, do you remember her?
Of course, she's the governor of Arkansas.
Yeah. She said, and this is a real story, but I thought it was fake. that Trump told her to take one for the team after Kim Jong-un winked at her.
That's great. That's
Sarah,
great.
Sarah, come in here.
Sarah, Kim Jong Un,
This
he
is
wants some Arkansas loving. Okay.
you're gonna be a hero for your country.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Here's the North Korean casting couch. You want to just go sit there? You save the world from nuclear war.
I guess Trump
Give him a
said
little love.
Trump said your husband and kids will miss you, but you'll be a hero to your country.
Oh, come on. That's ridiculous.
That's according to her. So I don't know, but that's hilarious.
Wow. He's got some interesting taste then too, because I find her to be incredibly unattractive.
Kim winked at you, Mr. Trump asked, adding, "Are you telling me Kim Jong-un hit on you?"
Sarah, Kim Jong Un has a thing for you. He wants some biscuits and gravy. He wants your biscuits and gravy. Okay?
So this is the direct quote from the New York Times. Well, Sarah, that settles it. Miss Sanders recalls the president joking, "You're going to North Korea and taking one for the team. Your husband and kids will miss you, but you'll be a hero to your country."
Oh, now if he's saying that as a joke, that is the most hilarious thing I think I've ever heard him say, and that's a high bar.
I we'll have to go
You
through the
don't think
greatest
he's being
hits.
serious?
No, well, Miss Sanders, Sarah Sanders is saying that he's joking,
Of course. Right. Okay.
which comedically is just hilarious
Right.
because
Right.
you're the president of the United States, you know.
Mm-hmm. Feel
Anyways,
free when you come back to give me some dim sum. I love the dim sum. Korean barbecue. Can't get it good here in Washington.
yeah,
That's
man,
great.
what an interesting character. I think 200 years from now, when other history books that are inferior
Inferior,
to a
but in the
twisted history,
future.
yeah,
Ours.
future history books, you're gonna be
Mhm.
like, hey, what about this Trump guy, man,
Oh yeah.
who was president, 45? What was he like?
45 and 47.
We'll see.
Yeah. So I guess we're gonna focus our episode on another continent altogether than North America and Asia.
Got two
The
guys from
word
Argentina.
two guys from Argentina.
And I would argue that one, if we gave you just their positions, their occupations,
Mhm.
you would guess that one was a lot more holy than the other one.
And yet reality bears out something entirely different.
But when you read through the text, when you read through the first hand sources, the primary sources, it's if you just seriously, we should do that right now. We're gonna say person A versus person B. We're gonna try not to give it away, even though it's gonna be pretty
Kind
obvious.
of obvious, but all right. Well, I'll play along.
Yeah. Actually, let's not do it. Javier Milei and Pope Francis
Just a couple Argentinian dudes
both spoke. Milei spoke. Milei actually gave a real speech at the World Economic Forum meeting,
in
and then
Davos. Hmm.
Pope Francis just wrote this letter in to the executive chairman of the World
He mailed it
Economic
in like
Forum.
his pontificate for the church.
Which one do you want to start off first?
I
Also,
say
there
let's show the Francis one. Let's show the Francis message.
this isn't too long.
Oh, we're not going to read the whole thing. You could just summarize what was said.
Sure.
Just the main part in which he talks about how this forum is mindful of the moral responsibility that each of us has in the fight against poverty, integral development of our brothers and sisters, and how there's a great moral spirit.
I like this paragraph.
Hmm.
The process of globalization, which has by now clearly demonstrated the interdependence of the world's nations and peoples, thus has a fundamentally moral dimension, which must make itself felt in the economic, cultural, political, and religious discussions that aim to shape the future of the international community. In a world increasingly threatened by violence, aggression, and fragmentation,
Mm.
it is essential that states and businesses join in promoting far-sighted and ethically sound models of globalization, which by their very nature must entail subordinating the pursuit of power and individual gain, be it political or economic, to the common good of our human family, giving priority to the poor, the needy, and those in the most vulnerable situations.
Yeah, that's communism. And it's globalistic communism, right? Workers of the world unite. But it's not even workers of the world unite. This is as you're going to see with Milei's not retort of sorts, but his refutation of what Francis is by and large saying within his speech before the World Economic Forum in Davos today. Uh, yeah, all of that leads to incredible impoverishment. But Millet rightly diagnoses the problem here is that this type of globalism, this type of World Economic Forum initiative, a series of initiatives, are much worse than ordinary and originalist Marxism, like that you would read in the Manifesto or Das Kapital. Whereas there was a consideration of class there, here, what the World Economic Forum is promoting is something not based on class, but a persistent and perpetual and all-powerful, omnipotent global elite that has no responsibility, nor does it take marching orders at all, nor does it have to be even responsive to peoples throughout the world or national concerns, regional concerns. Instead, it has to implement this communitarianism that always leads to human degradation, the evisceration of individual rights and liberties, and ultimately starvation, impoverishment, and all the catastrophes that we've seen within communist states. So that's here's the problem. And of course, we shouldn't. Yeah, I'm of course when I read this from Francis, this doesn't surprise me at all. He is consistent. He's consistently Marxist. The same sentiments are in his first encyclical Laudato Si on the environment. He advocates for global government because the regional and provincial concerns of people throughout the world are acting in, you guessed it, their national and communal self-interests, and not that of people who are sitting in Davos, Switzerland, lamenting about the made up environmental catastrophe that is climate change or whatever, or all of these other perceived and just fabricated chaotic crises and emergencies. So, and of course, there's no mention here. You would think that there'd be some modicum or some element of pullback or hesitancy after the global pandemic response that was universalized and supposed to be a worldwide effort to combat a common danger and peril to the human race. And it ended up, of course, being the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich on the globe in human history. Uh, so yeah, there's and of course we're not even getting into the health catastrophe that resulted from the global or the genetic serum being pumped into billions, which we addressed last episode. So yeah, but there's just let's turn the page there and let's get back on this globalization thing.
So before I talk about this, can you break down what apostolic exhortation Laudate Deum 34 is? Is that just this quote here?
Yeah, it's from he loves quoting his previous encyclicals. And you'll note that in these references, there's no scriptural reference, right?
Okay,
It's
right.
always like It
And
always is that he's backing and buttressing his own contentions with his previous contentions. It's Bergoglio circularism.
so the last line says, with these sentiments, I offer my prayerful good wishes for the deliberations of the forum, and upon all taking part, I willingly invoke an abundance of divine blessings. I
Yeah, well,
offer I offer my prayerful good wishes.
mhm.
Can't he can't just say prayers, right?
Well, I don't know. I, I'm not gonna nitpick there.
Okay, this is the part that made me the most mad. It is my hope then that the participants in this year's forum will be mindful of the moral responsibility that each of us has in the fight against poverty, the attainment of an integral development for all our brothers and sisters.
See how programmatic this is? The elites of Davos have to create a program for the attainment of integral development for all of our brothers and sisters. Whereas, of course, Western civilization and the Catholic Church in her history, in her entire existence, has always advocated for individuals to have the freedom and agency to determine the good through the right application of their informed conscience and moral science to attain that which is good. You see? Instead, this is all impositional. So it's perfectly Marxist. Go ahead.
Each of us has in the fight against poverty the attainment of an integral development for all our brothers and sisters and the quest for a peaceful coexistence among peoples. This is the great challenge that the present time sets before us. That made me the most mad. This is the great challenge,
Yeah.
you know? Like you're the
Globalization and having some NGO control everybody's life. That's the great challenge. That's what we have to sell people on
there's
or
so many
not sell
people,
them on.
there's so many people, like so many sheep that are lost. And
Yes.
this is the great
What
challenge.
that's the other point. All of this is so incredibly temporal. There's no focus on salvation. There's no moving people toward faith in Christ, which is
Well,
salvific.
that's the part of his tone that always makes me the most mad.
Yes.
How earthly it is.
Yeah, the church for Francis, the church is just a salvation army, and frankly, it's a very corrupt one at that. If Salvation Army was run with the same type of and level of corruption and greed and atrophy that the church operates with, it'd be long gone. You
Also,
look, yeah, go ahead.
if we he starts the second paragraph, this is just something to call out. Sadly, as we look around, we find an increasingly lacerated world in which millions of persons, and I'm gonna get to the point after this, men, women, fathers, mothers, children, any speech that lists the type of people like that
Mhm.
automatically sucks.
Oh yeah, he's not. I mean, I
Any,
doubt he's really writing this, but
but that goes for all speeches, like
Mhm.
uncles, aunts,
Mhm.
moms,
Nephews,
dads.
former roommates.
Speech auto sucks.
Yeah, that was a Spaceballs reference, by the way, for those of you who caught it.
What else do you have from here? Anything?
Just that this is as who was the commenter from whom we got the tweet on Twitter? But one of a good Michael Haynes. I love he someone put that I don't know if it was in the comments, but it's almost as if he's just playing with us now, you know? Like just one more heretical, absolutely embarrassing step, right? Disgusting. I'm glad this is getting ratioed for the most part, you know?
Also, could we talk about hell being empty? That was an exciting thing to find out this
Hmm.
week.
Right, right. Well, the real thing about and what's so dangerous about that is the church
So
has traditionally held that. Go ahead.
I should give a little more background just in case someone's
Oh,
listening and actually thinks that hell's empty.
all right.
Hell's not empty,
Nope. No.
but
Quite full. If the incarnate word of God is to be believed, and then Marian apparitions that have been affirmed by the church are to believe, and the multitude of saints who report of having either had visions or insights or just being scripturally informed and magisterially informed have said, no, it's quite full. And what's such an abomination about all of this, I hope and wish, I hope that hell is empty talk is that it endangers the soul. This is why I'm at the point where, whereas before I was going to say when Francis is finally dead and this dumpster fire of a pontificate is over, I was of the opinion that future and subsequent popes would go back and just rule as major swaths of his apostolic exhortations or encyclicals or even instructions, whether they're Traditionis Custodes or Laudato Si or whatever it is in between, and certainly Fiducio Supplicans, that these things will just be declared anathema, just that they're dead and gone and they're heretical. But that he was a legitimate pope. I think a future faithful pope is just going to have to declare he's an anti-pope
oh, you're there.
because he's so outside the framework of scriptural revelation as the church has interpreted it and traditionally interpreted, and then of course and magisterial teaching that's been consistent for centuries. I mean, he's consistently this. Everything that comes out of his mouth, everything that he is saying now is just openly, it's just contaminating the church with heresy and heterodoxy. It just has to end. So you have to come at the point where he's an enemy of God. He's an enemy of the church, of the body of Christ. He's the office that is supposed to be unitive and the visible head of unity for all Christians, the see of Peter, rather than bringing the Catholic world together in the one true faith and community of believers, the body of Christ, he's dividing it. And he's dividing it because he's a wolf among the sheep when we need a true shepherd. He's a ravenous, heretical, sick man, and there's no reason to follow him. There's no reason to follow him unless he begins by some radical metanoia and conversion to actually do his job and through authoritative pronouncements in keeping with magisterial teaching and scriptural revelation. There's no reason to follow him. He's abdicated the see himself.
Mm.
So is he a functioning pope in the absence of another one? I suppose, yeah. I don't know. I'm agnostic on that. But what we can say is that he's going to have to be declared an anti-pope.
So it's that damaging.
Oh, absolutely. It's been long too damaging. I mean, hell, I've been saying this since 2014, 2013. I mean, I recognize the writing, the heretical writing on the wall right away. So
Yeah.
this is, as we've said in previous podcasts, I'm not taking a victory lap. I've gained no satisfaction from that. I'm not patting myself on the back, but I just saw what was coming. I think anyone who was truly aware of Catholic teaching and was a faithful and devout Catholic saw the problems here.
What were the first signs? Just Laudato Si?
Laudato Si was big, and then if you just read up, I mean, as I did, reading back into his history, I mean, that he was formed by Esther Balestrina, who was such a raging Marxist that she was thrown from a helicopter by Pinochet. I mean, so these people are immensely damaging. And then the fact that the superior general of the Jesuits, again, this is related by Henry Sears' book and then by George Neumeyer's book, The Political Pope and the Dictator Pope, respectively, in reverse order, that the By the way, when I was in Rome and living in Rome, I met the superior general of the Jesuits, Hans von Kolvenbach. He was a Dutch Jesuit. I met him on the roof of the Jesuit residences in Rome. It's just right off the Via della Conciliazione, right, coming out from the Vatican. I met him because one of my teachers at Loyola was a Jesuit. He was actually a good Jesuit. You know, as I always say, there's no such thing as an okay Jesuit. They're either terrible or really good. So he was a really good one. And I met him, and he struck me as a pretty holy guy and very contemplative. He was praying in the office on the roof of the consistory, or not the consistory, but wherever they were, the Jesuit buildings. And he was the one who wrote that, and we know this now, the official documents, when Bergoglio was thought to be elevated to bishop, he had a report that said absolutely not. He's awful, right?
Okay.
He doesn't have the psychological makeup. He flies off the handle. He looks for allies to promote himself and his causes. He's anti-fraternal. And all those things that were in his file of sorts have just been taken to the exponential degree during his pontificate when he's been given this immense power over the church. And so what do you see? You see division, you see backbiting, you see corruption, you see graft, you see all the terrible crimes. These are crimes that are being committed. The turning the other way to pedophilia and the abuse scandals, the suppression of enemies, uh, and of course, always lacking the backbone to do it himself, but doing it through emissaries and his own little Tuco Fernandez cadre of St. Gallen group people. So, yeah, I mean, people, I know that there'll be faithful Catholics, even trads, that'll be like, well, I really feel uncomfortable insulting Francis. Dude, this is the time to ridicule this man. This guy he's a joke. He's an absolute joke. And I do take pleasure to a degree in ridiculing him because ridicule is a weapon, and it's a conscious weapon, right? When you're ridiculed, you do at some point kind of come to the conclusion, well, is that necessarily true that either what I'm saying or doing is naturally inviting ridicule and I ought to alter my, but it also makes others around you say, well, oh, that's an interesting point that person's making about that individual and his behavior. I don't hate the Pope and his person. I hate what he's doing to the church.
Mm. Do you want to talk about the other
Other
man from
Argentinian?
Argentina?
Yeah, let's hear a guy that is saying things that any pope should say, given what the Catholic Church has consistently taught in her history.
So Milei went way harder than at least I thought he was going to go. Let me share this.
Well, he went ahead and blew up all those rumors that he's a WEF lackey and tool, didn't he? And
Jury's
as
still
he had
out.
done
Jury's still
before,
out.
the jury's still out. You think the jury's still out?
Actions versus words, man.
Oh man. Okay. Well, who's gonna go in successive meetings at the WEF? By the way, he did this also when he attended a WEF meeting in Argentina before as an economist and as a contributor. He lambasted the whole program of globalization and this new god that's a religion to these sickening neo-Malthusian monsters in Davos. He did it again. Talk about the absolute balls and really bravado that this takes. So go ahead. You pick out what you want to say about his speech.
So he starts it out pretty hot. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Today I'm here to tell you that the Western world is in danger, and it is endangered because those who are supposed to defend the values of the West are co-opted by a vision of the world that
Inexorably.
inexorably leads to socialism and thereby to poverty. given the dismal, I'm just skipping around here.
Yeah, given
Give,
that's a good paragraph there, given
yeah,
the dismal failure.
given the dismal failure of collectivist models and the undeniable advances in the free world, socialists were forced to change their agenda. They left behind the class struggle based on the economic system and replaced this with other supposed social conflicts, which are just as harmful to life as a community and to economic growth.
So that's the reference to what I was saying before about neo-Marxism and racial Marxism, as James Lindsay has said it in his book. And this is what Milei is referring to here. Gone is the class struggle thing. The problem is that whereas Marx believed the proletariat would rise up, now everybody, according to the globalists, are members of the lumpen proletariat, which were even for Marx, like the dregs of society that would never be motivated or conscious enough to lead a true revolution. Everybody's the lumpen proletariat and the poor, because the poor aren't convinced because of the catastrophe that socialism has wrought on the world since its inception, and they're not convinced by its economic program. So what have neo-Marxists done? What have, following from the Frankfurt School, the Marcuses and Adornos of the world, and if you don't know very much about the Frankfurt School, look it up or find Michael Rechtenwald and follow him on, vote for him for president. But when you're not doing that and you're unconvinced of his candidacy as of yet, read about what the Frankfurt School is all about. And you'll determine that they recognize that the poor weren't leading the revolution and that capitalism ends up rewarding the poor for their work and their contributions in freer markets, not totally laissez-faire, but freer markets. So you had to create other diversions, distractions, and means of division and fissure. And the way to do that is through, as he lists them, first of these new battles was the ridiculous and unnatural fight between man and woman. So you have feminism. All that this radical feminism agenda has led to is greater state intervention to hinder the economic process, giving jobs to bureaucrats who have not contributed anything to society. Los Parasitos, see? Examples, ministries of women or international organizations devoted to promoting this agenda.
Yeah.
What's the next conflict, Charlie? Go ahead.
This is the best one. Another conflict introduced by socialists is that of humans against nature, claiming that we human beings damage the planet, which should be protected at all costs, going as far as advocating for population control mechanisms or the bloody abortion agenda.
Now think about that. So whereas you have the president of Argentina, a purely secular leader, although he is Catholic, doing what the Pope should be doing. And in his place, the Pope is lauding and approving and giving his sancture, his imprimatur to these people. This is it. What a world in which we live, Charlie.
Yeah, fair is foul and foul is fair.
Yeah, exactly. Up is down. As Peter Venkman said in the Ghostbusters, raining cats and dogs, cats marrying dogs. Real world crazy shit.
We're skipping a couple paragraphs. This one's really good. Today, states don't need to directly control the means of production to control every aspect of the lives of individuals. With tools such as printing money, debt, subsidies, controlling the interest rate, price controls, and regulations to correct so-called market failures.
Boom.
They can control the lives and fates of millions of individuals.
I love his
That's so crafty.
His profound background and scholarship in economics. He gets right to the heart of the matter, that the excuse that Keynesians and neo-Keynesians and socialists and communists on the further end of the spectrum have always used to regulate the economy, to say that laissez-faire is ridiculous, that capitalism needs to be governed, is because of so-called market failures. That you can't just allow the profit loss system to operate. You can't allow the animal spirits of the appetites, whether they be consumptive or productive for that matter, of individuals, and then the collection of them as an aggregate, direct and move the marketplace because of all of these supposed market failures, right? But of course, who's determining if the market has failed? Of course, it's some bureaucratic banker or some corporate CEO in league with central bankers and legislators and regulators to determine that there's a market failure. And every time that there's a market failure and some reaction is taken on the part of the bureaucratic mess and the behemoth, the juggernaut that is centralized government, and then that move, whether it's lowering artificially interest rates or printing more fiat or quantitative easing or greater fiscal waste and stimulus, whatever it might be, when that fails, the problem seemingly persists because of this market failure, they say, well, all we need is more government intervention to solve the problem. You see? So it's always these counterfactuals. And that's why the government, if you look, of course, they're always fighting these amorphous battles. The war on drugs, the war on poverty, the war on terror, because there's no objective that's stated, and then there's no goal to be attained. It's perpetually a problem, so that justifies the existence and the reason for government continuing to operate. It's just it's a monstrous, hideous, satanic scam.
I want to read
The worst in human history.
his three in conclusion paragraphs.
Yeah, please.
In concluding, I would like to leave a message for all business people here and for those who are not here in person but are following from around the world.
Can I pause here? This just reminded me. I'm sorry to want to put myself in Malay's shoes, but hey, when you have a hero, yeah, at least you find his sentiments heroic, and I find them such. This just reminds me of when I got in so much
I was
trouble
gonna
from this.
I thought about this when I was reading it too.
What was that?
What you're about to say.
When I would
You'd
pray
offer
for
petitions for
yeah,
entrepreneurs and
when I
business
was
people.
teaching
Yeah.
in high school before class, everyone would say their petitions, from my cat's health, or my grandmother, or my friends
For
dealing
the
with a
science
breakup or whatever.
test. That was a big one. Family
What's that?
Feud. If we're doing this Family Feud style, the number one petition was like the science test
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
they're
I
gonna
have
have.
to. I really want to get into. I want to pass my science test so I could get into Notre Dame. You know, gag. So I'd be okay. I want to pray for truckers. I want to pray for farmers. I want to pray for uh industrialists, and especially entrepreneurs, whether they be in your family or they're serving them, because without them, our ability to study here is an absolute and abject impossibility. And I can't tell you when students would then go and tell other teachers and the administration that I was praying for entrepreneurs and business people and professionals within the wide range. And I would say things like they've done more, one business owner has done by a multiple of 100x better for the poor than any bureaucrat that you'll ever bump into. That just lit them up, man. I got emails. Ooh, a lot of dirty looks in the faculty lounge, which I rarely ever went to anyway. I'd sneak in and sneak out.
Do not be intimidated either by the political caste or by parasites who live off the state. Do not surrender to a political class that only wants to stay in power and retain its privileges. You are social benefactors.
Boom.
You are heroes. You are the creators of the most extraordinary period of prosperity we've ever seen. Let no one tell you that your ambition is immoral. I fucking love that quote. I might frame that. Let no one tell you that your ambition is immoral. If you
Yes.
make money, it's because you offer a better product at a better price, thereby contributing to general well-being. Do not surrender to the advance of the state. The state is not the solution. The state is the problem itself.
Ugh.
You are the true protagonists of this story, and rest assured that as from today, Argentina is your staunch, unconditional ally.
Boom. Mic drop. Walk out. Afuera. And that's it. just
Yeah.
so
I just really
brilliant.
hope this wasn't created by ChatGPT. Like I hope it.
Oh, come on.
I just hope.
Yeah, he's too brilliant. He's too brilliant to
I
allow
don't know.
that to happen.
ChatGPT is pretty good. I just hope. I hope he's for real. I hope he's legit.
That'd be great if he asked Grok for help and Elon was typing it for him.
Right.
Yeah. Make sure you mention someone who would own a social media company just as a free speech space.
Right.
Okay, sir. Yeah. So there it is. Oh man. What absolute beauty is contained in that speech.
Yeah. It's just
The
two different
yeah,
just two really different tones. I mean, the delivery,
right.
you can tell a lot about a person by, their words, obviously. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And notice how empty and vacuous and without any reference to he's such an oh and you know that one of my major criticisms early on of Francis was that he's just an absolute economic ignoramus. He knows nothing of economics.
yeah.
So it's sort of it's the dismal outcome of having a pope that was ensconced and put in place under very shady circumstances and perhaps illegitimate circumstances that, of course, he has no idea what economics is. Now, that being said, I do want to note that as I'm reading Human Action, he might be saying, oh my God, is Richard actually admitting that he's never read Human Action? I am admitting that I've read vast swaths and excerpts of Human Action. I've never read it cover to cover. I felt this was a terrible blight on my resume, if you will. So I'm reading it this year cover to cover. And I've been tweeting a little bit off and on. But what's lamentable to me is that there's a part in Human Action in which Mises is really, and he does this throughout other works, where he's really lambasting the church's social doctrine. Because
Mm.
when he's reading it, all he's reading of these are these references by the popes of the 20th century, including John Paul II, in which they're like sort of playing footsie with socialism and not saying out and out that this is an abomination. It's in every way uh, an ideology based on greed and envy and a desire to live off the productive capabilities of another and other people and be a parasite. It robs people of their dignity. It robs people of their imagination. It robs people of their ability to work in fields that God has placed as possibilities in, as a result of natural talents bestowed upon them by God Himself. So all these catastrophes, they would just so Mises is rightly critical of that. I don't think he, because he was a man of his era, was desirous to look back and see what was going on earlier on in the church, earlier than the 18th or 19th century to see all these grand contributions. Although he was very much complimentary toward men like Aquinas and the scholastics at certain points. Although he does say some things like the scholastics went along too much with the church's social teaching, which is communitarian and thus uh, eviscerates human rights. So that's problematic. But the reason I bring that up is just because I think it's such a sad development that the church's true positions of what amounts or what not so much what the vehicles are, but what constitutes human dignity and man acting as a moral and free agent were sort of shrouded and covered up and not clear because of all of these terrible missteps because these prelates were not schooled enough in economic theory nor history nor the practice itself and praxeology itself to determine what is ultimately redounding to the good for temporal existence but also the spiritual well-being of human beings and individuals in particular.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I was just last thing because we had mentioned that Francis went on that previous rant of saying that there are no people in hell. What's so problematic there is that I'm going to use an Austrian phrase. It it forces people believing that there are no hell and repercussions for terrible transgressions, especially mortal and serious sin. Well, the church has always said that there are two moves of the conscience that motivate the sinner to repentance and reform and conversion. The better of the two is contrition, that you feel truly heartily sorry for your sins and having offended God. Out of love of God, you feel sorrow. That's a healthy guilt, as Father Tom said in his homily this past week. Conversely, there's the lesser of two, but it's efficacious nonetheless, and that's attrition, that you're fearful of the repercussions that come from your sin. And those two, even in the sacrament of confession, all you need is attrition. You might not feel contrite, but are you fearing the punishment of God and divine justice, natural justice? Yes. So that even suffices for you to have your sins absolved. And what's Francis doing by saying, "Oh, hell's probably empty, or if it even exists, or whatever"? It's an all-out assault on attrition. What is the purpose of Christ saying over and over again, the fires of Gehenna, there'll be wailing and gnashing of teeth, all these references to hell. In fact, one guy who I was following said there's actually more references to hell that Jesus says than there is to heaven.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
I don't know if that's true, but he speaks of hell all the time.
Yeah.
Woe to you, O hypocrites, right? I mean, who who is the rich man in hell who doesn't give Lazarus his scraps, right? Or doesn't give him a shelter? What? He's the only resident? Come on, this is ridiculous. Now we can easily transition here to our next quick topic. Although, C.S. Lewis put this Corsican in hell in his great treatise, The Great Divorce. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, Napoleon, according to C.S. Lewis, is in hell. And you know how he depicts Napoleon, our little Corsican monster, egalitarian despot, as Ryan McMakin calls him rightly? In The Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis says that Napoleon is in an opulent castle, makes Fontainebleau and Versailles look mediocre. But he spends his days walking through the castle saying, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have done this. I should have done that. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? So that's his hell, is
Hmm.
lament. Yeah. And he's stuck there. He can't leave. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I
I
didn't
love
know
that
that.
insight. Yeah, I love that insight. So you had some questions about Napoleon and
We don't have to talk too much about him.
Mm,
I don't know a whole lot about him, to be
okay.
honest.
Yeah.
And with the movie coming out, I was more so curious if you'd seen the movie. We talked a little bit before air, but can you give me your like 3 minute spiel on Napoleon? Because when
Sure.
we were doing, the book, it obviously didn't come up too much. So
Napoleon called himself a child of the French Revolution, and to a great degree, he's correct. In terms of what people often neglect about the morbid and disgusting and rotten fruits of the revolution, is that all of the revolutionary governments, from the National Assembly all the way through to the Directory and then the empire under Napoleon, were very much desirous of rooting France out of its provincial and regional and localized governing past, as existed even under the absolutist kings, the Bourbons, and centralizing power within Paris. And from that centralizing power, having a means by which to incorporate all of the distinct cultures that exist. A great book by the scholar Eugene Weber out of Stanford, it's actually even bigger than Human Action, is called Peasants into Frenchmen. I had to read that when I was at University of Chicago. It's a great treatise that even as late as the late 19th century, there were these dialects in France. So the whole mission was to make someone from the Auvergne or from Provence or from Brittany more of a Frenchman, have their allegiance sworn to the French state and its locality in Paris, not under the allegiance of or an affinity that they might have had for the king in the past, but the state became the new god of France. And this is why Robespierre and other revolutionaries, Danton and Marat, go through great lengths to de-Christianize France, because God is that obstacle to worship of the state. Napoleon understood I think Ryan McMakin from the Mises Institute in a recent post there has a great term for him. He's the first egalitarian despot. So he has this message of egalitarianism, and uh, and he was able to project because he was an ordinary lower noble, an impoverished noble from Corsica of all places. People forget that his real name was Bonaparte, and then was later Frenchified into francophone, better sounding to the French ear, Bonaparte. And then his ascendancy through military school, and then ultimately the dictatorship. It's really a triumph of, again, centralization and the spread of revolutionary ideas. I mean, people will laud from conservatives, especially neoconservatives. Neoconservatives love Napoleon because, well, he's at war all the time and war is profitable. Um, but his moves, his life led to the destruction of millions of lives in Europe, and it set Europe on a course of rejecting what we might otherwise call classical liberalism, or the ideal of liberalism in the good sense of that, namely free markets, a move away from mercantilism that had been so endemic within the previous regimes. Uh, Remember, there are elements in the Enlightenment, like Smith and Locke and the like, that were arguing for uh, a, a kind of recentering of the locus of power on the will of the people, or something along those lines, or basic protections, limited government, certainly laissez-faire in the case of Smith and other practitioners. And what we see with Napoleon, I mean, he centralized things again, and then he took that centralized state and then transmitted it to all of the different areas that he eventually conquered. And according to historians like Francois Furet and Ralph Raico, and this led to catastrophic consequences. And you see that local customs, localization, regional power, self-sovereignty of different peoples was eviscerated, so that these mega nation states might be created, in especially as we see just decades after Napoleon's fall at Waterloo in 1815, in the unification of Germany and the unification of Italy. So, in fact, I think there are a lot of parallels that could be seen between Lincoln and Napoleon. He was in favor of a police state. He had censorship. Uh, a guy named Fouché was in charge of the secret national police. It was a police state under Napoleon. He did organize things, and there is an economic retrenchment, if you will, after the devastation that the revolution had wrought and constant fighting. But it wasn't because of centralized banking. By the way, he reinstitutes the Bank of France under his control. It was because he conceded to the emigres. The emigres were these people that had left France during the revolution. They took all of their money. They were wealthy. They tended to be a noble or merchant class. And he said they could come back. So they brought with them all of their wealth and all their human capital. Well, if you do that, you're going to have an economic revival to a certain degree. But even then, the what was it? The statistic that Macon showed, something like uh, the French people had only 15% of the per capita GDP of a British subject at the time. So France was still impoverished under Napoleon. It was no sort of some
Oh,
sort of yeah. And that's because, of course, the British had the Industrial Revolution and they had all the fruits that were gained from that and comparatively laissez-faire economics and system. So yeah, he's a little bastard Corsican who rose to power and destroyed much of the world and the good that had resulted previously from a move toward localized and regional control and respect for local custom, tradition, and civilization. And he detested the church. He used the church as a pawn in his own
hmm.
political and imperial games.
How so?
Oh, well, first of all, he has this great quote. I say great in terms of historically apt. He says, "Look, if I was the emperor of a Muslim country, I'd be a Mohammedan. I'd be a
Hmm.
Muslim. If I was the emperor of Russia, I'd be Orthodox. If I was the emperor of China, I'd be Buddhist or what have you. But it just so happens that most of the country still, even after the revolution, is still Catholic. So I'll be a Catholic, right? So just like one of the men he admired was the old King Henry IV of Navarre. And remember, Henry IV, upon assuming the throne after St. Bartholomew's Day massacre and the religious wars in France, declared he was a Protestant. He said Paris is worth the mass, so he converted. Correct. So, in fact, during the Revolution, not too many people know this, but of all the equestrian statues, that means all the statues that were the kings on horseback. Um, the only two statues that weren't torn down were Francis the First of France and Henry the Fourth during the Revolution. All the other kings were beheaded, their statues torn, thrown into this, or demolished, melted down, thrown in the Seine, used for uh, Revolutionary Guard bullets or whatever it would be.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
some that's some interesting stuff.
We could go on a lot. We could have a Napoleon episode, but basically the response is he was, in many ways, his economic system was very syndicalist in nature. There was a lot of state control and orientation of business, but France was still a kind of backward, largely agricultural country, even in the time of Napoleon, and he did nothing to really advance more economic sectors within his realm or within his reign. And you had inflation and mass expenditure for the war. He bankrupted the country again.
So not a good dude.
No, bad, real bad. Wellington was right to vanquish him at Waterloo.
Do you want to talk about a town with other small men?
Very much so. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Awesome. Well, the first story we have today is actually River Forest, unfortunately. We talked about this before, this specifically, but the oak parkification of River Forest has been something kind of sad to see. Styrofoam ban is now in effect in River Forest. River Forest ban on polystyrene took effect January 1st. Although no cite, this is hilarious. Although no citations will be issued for violations that occur in the first 4 months of the year, and the ban will not affect smaller restaurants until 2025.
Do you see much styrofoam out there? I mean, I know Portillo's has styrofoam cups.
It almost seems like an attack on one or two places.
Ah, okay.
The village board voted in September to prohibit food establishments in the village from selling or distributing disposable food services. Uh, distribute disposable food service containers composed of polystyrene foam, commonly known by the brand name Styrofoam. Smaller restaurants with an annual gross income of under 500 grand must comply with the ban by January 1st,
Which
2025.
which by the way, you're puny if you're under a half a million in revenue as a restaurant.
The ordinance also mandates the village to perform education and outreach efforts regarding the prohibition during the first 4 months of 2024, with no citations to be issued during that time. It's always, that's another one. It's always education and outreach.
I know.
That's like a new one
Yeah.
that's come up in the last year. Any violation of any provision of the food and food establishment, I assume that's supposed to be food and drink establishment code, is subject to fines up to $500. Wow. Beginning May 1st, food establishments found in violation of the ordinance will be given one written warning prior to a citation being issued. The ban does not affect retail stores selling products in polystyrene as long as the product came from the manufacturer that way. Also exempted are not-for-profit organizations, any federal, state, or local governmental agency
Oh, of course. Well, yeah.
that provides food to economically disadvantaged individuals at no or nominal cost, and supplies and services provided in response to a public health or other emergency that is declared by a governmental agency with jurisdiction in river forest.
You want your styrofoam, you better take that shot, baby.
There's no such thing as small government.
No. But you know, the thing is too, what's funny there is they've just, what if they, outside of all of those exemptions, what's left? 2% of the styrofoam that they're going to eliminate?
So they get to that a little bit here.
Oh, okay.
According to the restaurant store, a food service industry supplier, the environmental repercussions of styrofoam containers have led to bans similar to river forests in cities and states across the United States. 9 states have laws limiting or banning polystyrene products, according to the advocacy group Environment Illinois, which they always have to throw in there like, hey, we're not the crazy ones here. This is happening in California as well.
Right. Exactly. And they're perfectly sane, so why shouldn't we do this?
Although styrofoam products are marked as recyclable, many recycling centers across the United States do not accept and recycle foam products, which means that the majority of used styrofoam products are placed in landfills, unable to be broken down over time. Okay. That's story 1.
You know what's so sad though? I remember as a kid, McDonald's always came in the styrofoam. It was always better. I'm telling you, it was always better. The styrofoam did something. It like kept the juices in or something. Like it was better. You can ask anybody who's my age. It's lamentable that we've gone to paper. It's just the same. It was, and I don't know if that's just
Nostalgia.
psychological,
Yeah.
but it's what Michael Malice also refers to as it's a great tragedy that there are no more Eden Pizza Huts. The Eden Pizza Hut, with the elimination of the Eden Pizza Hut, our civilization has gone downhill drastically since then.
Yeah.
They used to come out and they'd serve it in the piping hot pan and they'd serve it to you. Would you like a slice of pepperoni? Would you like? Amazing.
We used to be a proper country.
We used to be. And now there's just drive up Pizza Huts now. It's an abomination.
Former Rush Oak Park Hospital VP may plead guilty for fraud. Robert Spadoni is charged with stealing $622,500 through a billing scheme.
He wanted to give it to the migrants.
Right. Then he wouldn't even be arrested. Robert Spadoni, former Rush Oak Park Hospital vice president and chief operating officer, may change his plea to guilty for stealing $622.5 grand through a billing scheme. From about December 2013 until July 2021, Spadoni defrauded the hospital out of the money, according to the United States Attorney's Office. He entered a plea of not guilty to all counts in March 2023. Court records show a
It
change
took them 10 years to figure this out.
Yeah, 8 years. So, I mean, that's like what? That's a little less than 70 grand a year, or a little less than 80 grand a year.
A little less than 80 grand a year.
I don't know. That didn't come up on the books.
Yeah. Well, you saw that headline from Chicago about how the CPS lost $23 million in tablets, computers. They don't know where it is.
Yeah.
And then they figured out, then they said that the best part of the whole thing was that they said there was a $2.3 million tracking system that was placed in the computers and devices, but we don't know how to work it. That's gone too. That's gone too. That's classic. God, oh man.
Spadoni was indicted for the incident in February 2023. He was charged with 3 counts of money laundering and 3 counts of mail fraud, punishable by up to 10 and 20 years in federal prison, respectively. He arranged for the hospital to enter into an agreement with Medical Education Solutions, a company Spadoni established. Under the agreement, the hospital agreed to pay $6,500 a month for services Spadoni knew MES would not provide, according to the state's attorney. Spadoni also provided a direct report at the hospital with a $1,500 monthly cash payment to perform administrative support and compliance services covered by the MES agreement in an attempt to conceal his and a family member's financial interests. Spadoni and the family member are alleged to have used the rest of the funds for personal benefit.
He didn't give it to migrants after all.
No. Let's just talk about this real quick. This isn't Oak Park, but Chicago, electric vehicles, not a good mix, turns out.
When it's really cold out.
Quote, we got a bunch of dead robots out here. Electric vehicle charging stations throughout Chicagoland resemble graveyards because of this insane cold. This is a story from Fox Chicago. Electric vehicles may be the way of the future, but many EV owners are having trouble dealing with Chicago's bitterly cold temperatures. Public charging stations have turned into car graveyards over the past couple of days. Quote, nothing, no juice, still on 0%, said Tyler Beard, who has been trying to recharge his Tesla at an Oak Park Tesla supercharging station since Sunday afternoon. And this is like 3 hours being out here after being out here 3 hours yesterday. What a disaster.
Yep.
Beard was among the many Tesla owners trying desperately to power up their cars at the Tesla supercharging station in Oak Brook. It was a scene mirrored with long lines and abandoned cars at scores of other charging stations around the Chicago area. Quote, this is crazy. It's a disaster. Seriously, said Tesla owner Chalice Mazel. Mazel was forced to abandon her car and get a ride from a friend when it wouldn't charge. Another man summed up the situation succinctly. We got a bunch of dead robots out here. So there's that.
They're all from Oak Park.
That would be hilarious.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Tesla didn't respond to Fox 32's email or calls, but a Chicago area car expert says there are some things EV owners can do when it gets cold. I'm not even going to read through all that.
Buy a gas powered car.
Right. So
There you go.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah,
I thought it was a good one.
it is. We talked about the Pope. We talked about Javier Milei,
Heaven and hell.
Argentinians battling it out. What?
We discussed heaven and hell.
Heaven and hell. And of course, we were able to work in a guy that most certainly is in hell, no matter what Pope Francis says, and that's Napoleon Bonaparte. Because as it turns out, egalitarian despots whose actions, just for his own glory, lead to the deaths of millions of people, they don't go to heaven. Right? They don't go to heaven. So, yeah. Or at least we think that they don't really go to heaven. So there you go. You know, you have these people.
That's all I got.
Yeah. As a former teacher of mine, Benedict Ashley, a great Dominican, said, he would always he was in his 90s when he would tell me this. He'd go, Athanasius, you have to hate the souls in hell with a holy hate. Hate them with a holy hate.
That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
You're right. You're right. So, Father Ashley, I hope you're smiling down on me from heaven for telling people that.
Do you have anything else? Anything you want to
That's it,
cover? Buy,
Charlie.
buy Gary a beer.
Buy Gary a beer. Buy me a beer because I'm right here. I don't want to use the third person at buymeacoffee.com/Gary Richide, and you can show your appreciation and help me to drink more. Because God knows 2024 is leading me to it.
All right, everyone. Peace out.
Peace. Take
God
care.
bless.